Welcome to Tweet of the Week, and this week the post I want to look at is this one here, which is all about bad school rules. Why are they bad and how can we possibly enforce them when we know they are bad? So one of the ways a school rule can be bad is if it's disproportionately harsh or even unethical. Some of you may recognise this image from a news story going around at the moment. I don't have any personal contact with the school, but the allegation is that there is a cheaper school skirt which is very similar to the official school skirt that comes from a supplier, and that the former is being turned down because it's not in line with the uniform policy. The reasons why I'd suggest this is an unethical school rule is that firstly, we are in a cost of living crisis that's happened after years of austerity, and if there is a way to make uniform cheaper for parents, we should be doing that. And the second reason is that is exactly what the Department for Education has already asked us to do. Thirdly, in order to check small details like that, we really are, in my opinion, looking for issues. We can talk about grand values like school community and how uniform can reinforce a sense of identity, but actually I think the vast majority of people would see this as a bad school rule. It is disproportionate, and in this case it's potentially causing financial difficulties for parents who are struggling already. So another example would be this one here. This is admittedly from quite a few years ago. Again, I don't know if it was represented accurately in the press. All I can tell you is that the allegation was that students were placed in some form of lunch isolation for the reason that their parents were not fully up to date with their payment for their school meals. Now, there was quite a large backlash against this. That's one of the reasons why it made the press. And I think in that kind of situation, it is a good example of two questions that should be easy to answer if you have a positive school culture. The first is, what was said to the staff who raised this as an issue? The second thing is, what was said to the students who looked at their peers and raised the issue and said, that is not fair, that is not right? Now, either you have fantastic answers to those two questions, or you have a culture where those questions or those issues were not raised. And that, to me, is not a sign of a positive school culture. That is no comment on this particular individual case, but it's something that I think we all need to reflect on in terms of rules in our school. Do we feel the staff are able to raise what they do not think is either ethical or proportionate? Another example of a rule that I felt was disproportionately harsh was a simple one about pupil movement around the school, where a 60-minute detention was given for essentially pausing and leaning on the banisters. Now, the original tweet, if you go back to the start of the video, actually asked, how do you implement rules which you think are unfair? And to be honest, the reality is that sanction rarely was given by the staff. However, because it was given by some staff and still existed as part of the behaviour policy, what you end up with is a kind of random effect where I think that pupils are even more enraged when they get sanctioned because, firstly, they can see other people occasionally not being sanctioned, and secondly, they then take it very personally when they are sanctioned. And that would be an example of a rule that didn't really have staff behind it. We are teachers, but we are human beings first. And if a staff doesn't feel the rule is proportionate, what you often, I think, end up with is a very inequitable distribution of how that rule is put forward in the school community, which probably doesn't benefit anyone. So I'm going to use that rule as an example of really how the rule needed to be reformulated. So firstly, what was the real issue? The real issue was students were not getting to lessons on time, and the leaning on the banisters was picked up as a way of moving students through the corridors more quickly. In effect, what we probably needed to do was pick up the rule at the point where it had a much more significant impact, which was on entrance to lesson. And actually, that is a far more efficient way of dealing with lateness to lesson, particularly in a large school where you can't have presence everywhere in the building to really monitor those corridors. Secondly, we should have reflected, and we did reflect on the reasons why. Are we actually allowing enough time for students to get to lesson? What is our current state of punctuality? Where does it need to be? And how reasonable is it what we are asking the students to do? Are we allowing enough time for example, students to use the toilet in between lessons? So that's something that it's always a good idea to unpick. If a rule is disproportionately harsh, how did we get to this point? And how can we make it more effective and more ethical in terms of the students and more efficient for us as well? And I would hope that both of those would be possible. So stay with me for part 2, where I'd like to look at rules that are unenforceable for some reason, not necessarily unethical or disproportionate. If you did find anything in this video interesting or useful, please comment, like and subscribe, and hopefully I'll see you in the next video.